Welcome back to the Lost Tactician, where we excavate the forgotten knowledge that kept our ancestors alive in the world's most unforgiving environments. Today we're ascending into the silent peaks of the Alps, where winter doesn't just arrive, it dominates. For centuries, shepherds who guided their flocks through these mountains faced a brutal truth. Survival meant understanding nature so intimately that you could turn its fury into shelter. These men possessed no Gore-Tex, no propane heaters, no emergency beacons. What they did possess was something far more valuable, an intricate knowledge of materials science and thermal dynamics that modern engineering often overcomplicates or completely ignores. We're about to unlock their secrets, methods so effective they transformed the harshest elements into impenetrable warm havens using nothing but what the mountain provided. The forgotten material, science of alpine resources. The alpine shepherd's genius began with observation, not invention. Stand in a high mountain valley after a heavy snowfall, and you're surrounded by what seems like hostility, biting wind, temperatures that plummet 40 degrees after sunset, and snowpack that can bury a man in minutes. Yet these shepherds recognized that this same snow, when properly understood, becomes one of nature's most sophisticated insulators. Wind-packed snow, compressed by the relentless alpine gales, creates air pockets that trap warmth with remarkable efficiency. A cubic meter of properly consolidated snow can insulate as effectively as modern foam boards, achieving thermal resistance that would impress contemporary architects. But snow was merely the foundation. These shepherds understood material layering in ways that anticipated modern thermal engineering by centuries. Evergreen boughs from pine and spruce trees weren't randomly scattered, they were strategically harvested and positioned. The resinous needles created a moisture barrier, while the springy branches provided dead airspace, that crucial gap between cold ground and warm body. Beneath sleeping areas, shepherds would lay down thick beds of these boughs, sometimes 2 feet deep, creating what we now call a thermal break. The aromatic oils in the needles served double duty, repelling insects even in winter and providing psychological comfort in the darkness, the smell of life in a world of white death. Earth and stone completed this natural trinity of materials. Shepherds identified south-facing hillsides where soil remained workable longer into autumn, excavating partial dugouts that borrowed the Earth's thermal mass. So, below the frost line, soil temperature actually stays pretty constant, usually hovering around 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, even when the surface temperatures drop well below zero. By building into hillsides instead of right on top of them, these structures cleverly harness that geothermal stability. Stone walls, when available, weren't just about holding up the roof. They actually absorbed heat from small fires during the day and then radiated it back through those long alpine nights. It's like a thermal battery running entirely on physics, no fancy tech required. Structural brilliance, sacred geometry against the storm. The architecture of these shelters really shows an intuitive grasp of physics that rivals formal engineering. Alpine winds, they don't just blow, they accelerate through valleys and over ridges, creating pressure differentials that can just tear apart poorly designed structures. So, shepherds responded by building low and curved, presenting the smallest possible profile to the wind. The classic snow cave, or quinzee, wasn't dome-shaped by accident. That curve, you see, distributes the snow load evenly across the structure, which prevents collapse points and at the same time deflects wind over and around the shelter, instead of letting it build pressure against flat surfaces. Entrance design demonstrated particular genius. Rather than cutting a simple door, shepherds created L-shaped or angled entries, positioned below the main sleeping platform. Cold air, being denser than warm air, sinks. This fundamental principle meant that frigid winds entering the shelter would pool in the entryway depression, while warmer air rose and, well, remained in the sleeping chamber. Some shelters incorporated a short tunnel entrance that forced incoming wind to lose velocity through friction against tunnel walls, arriving in the main chamber as a gentle, manageable draft rather than a howling intrusion. This wasn't trial and error, this was applied fluid dynamics learned through generations of observation and survival. The integration of natural features elevated these structures from mere shelters to tactical masterpieces. Tree pit shelters, excavated around the base of massive conifers, exploited the natural well that forms as overhead branches shed snow away from the trunk. The tree itself became a central pillar, its root system stabilizing surrounding snow, while its canopy provided an initial barrier against fresh snowfall. Shepherds would enlarge these natural depressions, line them with boughs and roof them with woven branches and packed snow, creating structures that were nearly invisible from above, a critical advantage when avalanche risk or predators demanded concealment. Thermal dynamics, the physics of passive heat. Perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of these shelters was their relationship with heat, or rather, their ability to maintain warmth with minimal heat input. Modern camping often assumes that comfort requires active heating, but alpine shepherds understood that preventing heat loss matters more than generating heat. The human body produces roughly 100 watts of thermal energy at rest, equivalent to a bright light bulb. In a properly insulated shelter, this metabolic heat becomes sufficient for survival, even comfort. The secret lay in creating what modern engineers call a vapor barrier, while maintaining just enough ventilation to prevent carbon dioxide buildup. Shepherds packed moss, nature's weatherstripping, into every gap and crack, creating airtight seals that stopped convective heat loss. Yet they also understood the danger of complete sealing, particularly when small fires were used. Careful observation had taught them that certain snow structures allowed slow gas diffusion while blocking wind, creating natural breathability in shelter walls. When fires were employed, they were small, positioned near the entrance where smoke could escape through the exit tunnel, while heat rose into the sleeping chamber, a thermosiphon effect that moved warmth without mechanical assistance. The placement of the sleeping platform above the entrance created a temperature gradient that maximized comfort. In well-constructed shelters, the sleeping area could maintain temperatures of 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, purely from body heat, even when outside temperatures plunged to -20. This differential meant the difference between hypothermic death and restful sleep. The shepherds understood what modern survival schools now teach. In extreme cold, shelter quality matters infinitely more than gear quality. These techniques aren't merely historical curiosities. They're blueprints for resilience in an uncertain world. As modern supply chains reveal their fragility and climate instability increases extreme weather events, the shepherd's knowledge becomes immediately relevant. Emergency preparedness experts now advocate for exactly these principles, understanding local materials, leveraging natural physics rather than fighting them, and building redundancy through simplicity rather than technological complexity. You know, contemporary architects studying sustainable building have actually rediscovered many shepherd principles just under new names. Passive house design, with its emphasis on super insulation and thermal mass, really echoes the earth-sheltered dugouts of Alpine highlands. Modern disaster relief organizations teaching snow shelter construction are, often unknowingly, transmitting knowledge refined over centuries in these same mountains. The fundamental truth remains unchanged. True innovation often comes from understanding natural laws so thoroughly that solutions become elegant in their simplicity. What we lose when we forget this wisdom is more than technique. We lose humility and perspective. These shepherds possessed no formal education in thermodynamics or structural engineering, yet their shelters worked because they observed carefully and thought deeply about what they observed. The Alpine shepherd's art reminds us that survival has always been about partnership with the environment rather than domination of it. These men didn't conquer winter. They learned its language and built accordingly. Their legacy isn't found in museums, but in principles that remain valid wherever humans face harsh elements with limited resources. If this exploration of forgotten survival wisdom resonates with you, help us preserve and share this knowledge. Like this video, subscribe to the Lost Tactician and share it with anyone who values the intersection of history, survival, and human resilience. Until then, stay tactical.